Yeah, we're live. It is 1:38 in the afternoon, Saturday. Hopefully everyone's having a good weekend. It's nice and sunny here, so gonna go out and probably take the dogs for a run. Bruno and Brady always come up and remind you, hey, it's time. We need to go. We need to go do stuff. You need to get out and get some vitamin D and get some sunshine and make all that happen. But before we do that, we need to talk about some very cool stuff. And this was, I'm going to go ahead and get these things running here so people can see it. Got a Vortech supercharger on a 5.3 liter. And right off the bat, you might think, oh, well, Richard, for a truck application, which is what the 5.3 would have come in, and a 4.8, some of the 6.0s as well, that came in a truck. And you've said that a centrifugal supercharger has a rising boost curve. So why would we want to do that in a truck where we have less boost down low and we have more up at the top? Well, let's talk about that because I think that that's important. First of all, obviously, the difference between having even no boost and a little bit of boost, always better. More boost, obviously, is even better, but a little bit of boost is going to be a power gain that you get anyways. In fact, I wish I would have put this kit on my truck to run it around just to kind of see what it was like. Even in non-intercooled form, I probably would have run it in intercooled form just so that we could run some more timing and maybe even run it on the 85, which kind of been cool. We could have full timing and more boost. But one of the things that I want to talk about, we can kind of take a look at this power curve here and get an idea. So on this thing, we made, and I need to adjust these power curves here so that we can see all of it. For some reason, it's not allowing me to see all of that. But you can see there's, this is a curve where we ran the thing naturally aspirated. And then we ran it, under boost, and we made a lot of power. We made almost 900 horsepower in this case. And while that's not the combination that I would suggest that you run, in your truck application, the interesting thing is that if we take a look at this curve, and we can kind of see, if you look closely, you can kind of see the RPMs. That thing was running to 6,200 or so, which is not terribly high. But let's suppose that you wanted to run this thing, and that thing was running like, I don't know, I'm thinking the boost was fairly high. We can check on that. But the issue with the truck application and a centrifugal is, one, we have less boost down low, so than you do with a positive displacement blower or arguably even the right kind of turbo. So how do you make this work? Well, the answer always is to turn up the boost, and you spin the blower faster and you make more boost. The good thing about the truck application that also makes this a worthwhile way to go is that one of the things that we worry about is on a centrifugal blower, we turn it up. We get bigger gains on top than we do down low. We still get gains down low, but we get even more up the top. And that worries people. They're like, well, yeah, I don't want to run 15 pounds on the top. I only want to run 10 pounds, but we want the boost to come in earlier. Okay, well, spin the blower up. And the nice thing on a truck application, if your truck is shifting it, like if you care about power up to 5,500, then don't let it rev any higher than that. I mean, rather than go to 6,000 or 6,500 or even 7,000 on some of these things, if you're really trying to wick this thing up and make lots of boost and make lots of power, you would run it at more engine speed, because as you increase engine speed, you gain more flow from the blower, as long as it has the RPM to do that. You gain more flow from the blower, more boost, more power, all the magic stuff is happening. But the cool thing about a truck application is if you shut this party off at 5,500, even while the thing is still climbing, and you limit it at 10 pounds of boost there, by turning it up and getting 10 pounds at 5,500, you've gotten more boost also down low. So you've gained everywhere basically, and then you're not worrying about doing the 15 pounds. And this could be whatever number you want. I don't want it to be 20 pounds. I want it to be 15 pounds or whatever that is. But if you're cutting the RPM off early and having this thing shift, like I said, at 5,500 RPM, then everything is going to work out fine. And so for a truck application, what you have is, instead of worrying about what else is happening at higher engine speeds, you go, look, I've got a 5.3 truck engine that's making 10 pounds of boost at 5,500, and that is kind of awesome. Now, we may only be making 3 or 4 pounds down low, but we're making 10, and then obviously 3 or 4 pounds down low is going to be better than none, definitely. And then the 10 pounds is always going to be good. And then later on, if you wanted to say, hey, you know what I should really do is I should extend my shift point from 5,500 to 6,000 and let it charge even harder on the big end. And it obviously can do that. But if we're just talking about, hey, look, I want a truck and I want to make, good average power production, good torque production. If we let this thing, if we limit this thing at 5,500, it's going to be a good truck engine. In fact, you'll be making peak horsepower and peak torque at the same RPM if you limit this thing at 5,500 RPM, because we have this rising boost curve and the rising efficiency with the blower. On this particular application, we ran a Vortech T-trim, we ran intercooled, we ran E85 on it, we ran a TI trim supercharger, and then we actually ran into belt slippage at the top. So this thing was on its way to go to 1,000 horsepower. It was already at 900. And so it was on its way to make, and this was a 5.3 that we did way back with the guys from Strictly Performance that had the ported K-Tech heads on it. We had a big camshaft in this thing. We had a fast manifold. We had all the things that we were doing to get the thing to make good NA power. And then we added the Vortech to it with a different intercooler on it. And all of that worked out really good. And I was looking at this thinking, you know what, at 5,500, this thing would be really good, because at 5,500, this thing's making 800, like 780 horsepower. So it'd still be a lot of fun, and making, since we're at 5,500, it's making 750 or 740 foot-pounds, whatever that math comes out to. But you can kind of see there, we just can't see the scale on the other side. But 750 horsepower, 750 foot-pounds would be awesome. And part of that is because the 5.3 that we used to start making this power was already a good one to begin with. And you could do it that way. You could also, even if you just take a 5.3 and stick a camshaft in it, you could do it with a 4.8. It'd be better with a 5.3, because in a truck application where you want torque, everything is better with a bigger motor. Be even better with a 6-liter, obviously, a 6.2. You could make all that happen. But on this instance, we had spun this blower up faster, and it was also a good size blower, and we were doing it on a good, I want to say a good size motor. It was a 5.3, but it was also a 5.3 that had decently ported heads. They were not maximum effort deals, but good ported heads. It was basically a stock bottom end, because the Strictly Performance motor that they supplied was like a boost ready deal, but it was a stock block, stock crank. It had Gen 4 rods, and then it had hard anodized factory pistons in it, which with extra ring gap. We put head studs in it, and it did all that. Now you guys could argue that, hey, yeah, Richard, you could do this with a roots blower, might even be a better combination for 5,500. That's fine. Turbos, obviously another good option for this kind of combination, especially at 5,500. All of that's going to work good. But I just thought that this was interesting on the Vortech side, that, hey, look, that power curve right there would be a lot of fun in a truck, and it would keep charging. And then, like I said, later on, if you wanted to go to 6,500, as long as you could make sure that, in this instance, we did run into belt slip, but a better belt, a cog belt or an 8 rib or 10 rib would have made this work better. But since we were starting to look toward 1,000 horsepower, you got to make sure that you have enough, all of that stuff. You got to make sure that you have enough belt wrap. You got to have an 8 rib or 10 rib. You got to have a good pulley assembly. You got to have all of that stuff. And we didn't do that going in, because we were using all of the factory accessory drives on this, and just kind of had our fingers crossed and hoping for the best. We're like, yeah, it's charging. Oh, then it's not charging anymore. But you can see that was only at 6,200. And this motor, you can see from the NA power curve, as it's just basically still climbing there and holding level out past 6,500, which would have meant that we would have, because we were continuing to add boost as we did this power curve, you can see we're just now getting at about 5,800. We're just now kind of past the torque peak. And so this thing would have just continued to climb at a fairly rapid rate, which is, which is kind of awesome. But again, a good solid truck motor, clip the thing at 5,500, and you're on your way. Let's see what you guys got going on a Saturday. How can we make more boost? That's right. Pertinent information. Turbo Sentra. Good for small tire racing. Yeah, that rising kind of thing can improve traction. Blowers need cog tooth belts. They definitely do if you don't want them to slip. And we've always had the best luck doing that rather than some of the other stuff. Because I always wonder, even when we see that we have a nice kind of rising and consistent boost curve, how much slip are we getting even if we use an 8 rib or a 10 rib? With a cog, we're not getting any slip. But with these others, is there some? Is there 1%? Is there 2%? Is there no percent? 2%? The deuce. Good afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon. I can see a duck. Yes, that is the StreamYard duck. Any thoughts on using the inner chiller in conjunction with air-to-water intercooler? Yeah, you can try that. I don't like having to run the AC system to try to make power. I think that's counterintuitive. But anything that you can do to lower the charge temperature, and also I honestly don't want the complexity of that system. But guys have used it, and for drag racing, it probably works good for a single pass or whatever. But anything that you can do to lower charge temperature is a good idea. It's both a good idea from power, but and certainly at the very least from a safety standpoint, so you have, you know, a wider tune window. Better for traction. 6-liter has more than enough torque on the bottom end. You got your you got the wideband turbo sensor. Should be able to tune it now. Cool. Unrelated. If you money shift, how likely is the transmission to be bad? On a 4L60, it's almost guaranteed. The more that you abuse your transmission, and if you're flat shifting, the more likely you are to break it. 4L80 with the gear vendors is the way to go for drivability. Do you really need a 4L80 and the gear vendors? Like, how much do you want to multiply the... How low do you want the RPM to be? Put a rod through the block. It sounds like you missed the shift. Saturday, where's the pizza? Turbos don't slip belts. Doing a 5.3 blown, air-cooled, inner chiller, 4L80, and gear vendors with a 456 gear. I guess I kind of question the need for a 456 gear unless you have a really, really big tire, and then to double overdrive it. But you can tell me what you're doing and maybe let us know what's up. Anybody know somebody that can build a 6-speed auto truck 4x4 trans to hold some power? Being a belt slip, the M112 is eating my belts. Uh-oh. They normally do that when there's belt misalignment. LS1 oil cooler bypass, is it a bad idea? Why do you want to bypass it? Is it leaking or something? If it's not leaking, I would keep it. I'm going to pick up an 81 Camaro for parts for my 81 Z28. Nice. Are there a lot of good parts on the donor car? Why, in general, blower more expensive and makes less power than the turbo setup? A blower at the same boost level almost always makes less power than a turbo setup because it takes power away from the engine to drive the supercharger, and it doesn't do that for a turbo. It might take a little bit because of back pressure, but way less than it takes to drive a blower. And blowers traditionally are generally not also as efficient at processing the air, let's call it. So particularly if they're kept in their range, they have better efficiency than a blower does. Turbos seem to be the way to go for almost every application. I don't agree with that, but they do work good. It's 9:48 p.m. in Ireland. What's going on, Ireland? Shout out to those guys. If I leave my YouTube on autoplay, plays the streams. I like that. I do like hearing that. That's good for me. I want to build an all-wheel drive turbo Silverado like Tolman did. Okay. Then you should follow his builds and see what he did. Just catching up on things, getting used to freedom after the hospital stay. What happened, Neil? Then 8-speed trans, 24-inch tires. 24 is not big at all. I'm cold. Rerouting my oil catch can and deleting the PCV because the sealed catch can does the PCV work. Since I was running it in line with the PCV, it was restricted. causing oil leaks. Okay. Yeah, we don't use a PCV valve on the valve cover when we run an open thing like we do on the dyno. We just run a big open tube, and we run it on both sides now with the BTR valve covers that we have, which are really cool because they have AN fittings on them. And so we just run those lines out to atmosphere, but you could also run them to a catch can. That works as well. But yeah, we don't have a PCV valve, and we don't have a valve restricting it because that just stops the flow. If there is, particularly if it's, you know, some of these junkyard motors might have a little more crankcase breathing or might need a little more. Got a stock bottom end LS1 Camaro. I'm planning on 243 unported heads and the low buck truck cam with an LS6 intake set up for autocross. Plans changing, going with a 383. Is there a better cam? Better for what? There's not a, it's not an absolute better thing. There might be a different cam that will do something different that you want, and we could talk about that. I don't know how much power you're trying to make. I don't know where you want your power band, any of that stuff. 456 entry level hill climb gears. Oh, Turbo Sentry, it's slipping. Do you not have a good tensioner on it? Also be nice to cruise at 75 miles per hour at 1200 RPM with the gear benders. I suppose you can also run into problems with that low of a cruise RPM on the freeway, particularly given the camshaft that you choose. .456 because I have technical 8 speeds. Yeah, but that doesn't affect the cruise RPM unless you're doing it in a different than top gear. Only be way out of a good VE down at 1200 RPM. Yeah, I don't know that 1200 RPM is going to benefit you unless you have a stock or a very, very mild cam. That's really probably going to be too low. We found that out on the Mustang when we put 241 gears in it, and then it had the 0.68, I think it was 0.68 overdrive in the T5 trans with that 224, 232 cam on the 302. It did not want to run. It did not want to cruise down the freeway at that RPM. It was unhappy. Using the 4L80 this week and coming for some parts. There you go. Got sick and stupidly dehydrated, which has caused some issues, but you're on the mend. Okay. Should I have another project car I've had since I was 16? Turned out to be a Copo Body 69. No engine or trans. Any ideas? Thinking retro mod. With it, since I'll never find the engine. Could you find a period correct 427 for that? If it's got the right serial numbers on the body, you should be able to put together because the factory motors did not have serial numbers on them. They just have date codes that would be right for that body. I'm pretty sure that that's the case. And so you could make that into a Copo, which is definitely going to be valuable. Trying to stay low RPM, 6,000. Yeah, on a 383 with those stock heads and that intake manifold, I still think I would pick a low buck truck cam. Stock 150,000 mile tensioner. Something on the accessories of my truck is making noise. I'm assuming that it's a tensioner. I'm gonna have to take a look at it. Have you seen anyone make a high-end NA64? FR makes heads for them. There's big stroker kits available. Why is no one doing these engines? Well, I don't think no one doing them is the right answer. They have plenty of head flow. You can make lots of power. So are you talking about doing a 6.4, or are you talking about doing some sort of stroker variant of that? got a friend here local that I'm sure that's supposed to be literally, not literary. Has every model of GTO Judge. Those are cool. GTOs are cool. Yep. Spell check. It wants to spell what it wants to spell. Yeah, this thing would be good, this power curve on this one, because you have even down at 3,200 RPM, 3,300 RPM, you have over 500 foot-pounds, which is good. And then 6, and then 7, and then 750. That'd be a lot. People can't afford Hemi engines. Based on 6.4, but there's 426s and even 454s. I want to know how much NA power it can make on pump gas. I don't know about on pump gas. A bigger motor would be better, but you get to a point where you start having cylinder pressure and you have to pull timing and stuff. So I don't know where the pump gas number is. That's not ever how I would do the most power possible. We can make a lot on pump gas because we run them cold, and so it never hurts power. But when you're running out on the street, especially if you have it in a car that's running at 200 degrees or whatever the coolant temp is, it's going to be more problematic. But they have cylinder heads on those. This will give you an idea. They have cylinder heads on those that flow, I don't know, somewhere probably between 350 and 400 CFM. So you're talking about stuff that's like, 750, 800 horsepower stuff. 2-lane blacktop 55. It's about 45 minutes for me. What air intake temperature do you pull timing? We don't do that on the engine dyno. I don't pull timing based on air intake temp because we're always running an intercooler, so we don't really have to worry about that. Richard, did you ever E85 swap for 5.3 GM trucks? You mean on a stock motor? Have I put E85 on it? I haven't that I can remember. I have run E85 in my truck, but not some sort of specific swap. Is European the biggest engine I've ever had is a 1.6 liter? They have lots of big motors in Europe too. James says he starts pulling timing at 130 degrees. That could easily be an NA temperature if the guy has an open element air filter under the hood. Hero, we've run E85 on my truck, but we didn't do anything to do that. We just put E85 in it. James, what's going on? Please post the mini turbo videos, half side hot turbo. Oh yeah, we did do that test. But none of the turbos are mini turbos though. I think of as a mini turbo as a 1.8T Volkswagen. That's mini, or even minier, is because a 1.8T turbo Volkswagen turbo would be an upgrade for the turbo that's on the factory turbo that's on, I think it's an RB31 or something, on the 1 liter Sprint motor. Those are really tiny. It gets there NA, strongly suggest true cold air intakes. Yeah, James, I agree with you. It can easily get there. During the guys would do that in Vegas. They'd have their turbo Integras and Civics and stuff, and they would have the turbo, on the B series, it's mounted on that front side, and then they'd have the air intake right behind the radiator. I'm like, it's 112 degrees outside, and so you have 112 degrees going through a radiator that's got to be 190. I said, what do you think the air temperature is going in? Oh, we don't care. Okay, that's good thinking. So you're basically, you just don't run an intercooler because that's what just happened. Do you think I could just run E85 in my O1 stock? Yes, you can. If the motor's all stock, you have enough injector to run E85. But I don't know what you're going to do to tune for it, because it will self-tune under cruise, but I don't know what it'll do at wide open throttle. 1600 air-cooled VW T25. A T25 is way bigger than the turbo that we ran on the Sprint. 4.8 liter be considered huge? Yeah, the BMW has big motors. So does Mercedes. I've had loads of VWs. I've only ever owned one air-cooled VW. What I do is when I'm testing at Westech, and if we're done testing, and we're running boosted stuff like we did all the turbos recently with Jimmy from Richard Older Performance, and there's E85 left over, I just pour it into my truck. So it has some sort of, usually 87, and then it has a mixture of E87 and E85. Not E87, just 87 and E85. Runs fine. Any idea to source snouts for the L67s and M90s? Yeah, you just get them from the wrecking yard. You just buy the whole blower. They might just sell you the snout, but I've never tried that. You're not going to find a lot of 112s there, but you certainly can find lots of. We found endless M90s. 50/50 nitro mix. I'm also from Europe, the Balkans, and lots of gangsters here drive Mercedes and BMWs. Big engines aren't exclusive to U.S. manufacturers. No, they have 5-liter, 4-liter V8s, 5-liter V8s. Mercedes had some 6+ liter stuff. Had a Beetle back in the 80s. It was fun. I had a 73 Super Beetle. Air temperatures get to 180 easily. Kind of not great. Why are they getting that hot? Do you not have an intercooler or something? Got an M90 with a short snout. Who has a short snout M90? What is your definition of short? Is the L67 or the L32? Is that your definition of the short one? You need something longer than that? Got a good deal on some wheels for my sand rail. Next is bigger injectors for my Yukon. Getting complete Trailblazer SS intake manifold. That's hydro dip for $100. I want to find somebody that could do hydro dip. I bought the stuff to do it, and I guess I should try it before I have somebody else do it. But I have some things that I want to do. On the Vortech with no intercooler, okay, yeah, that could be problematic. I would definitely be doing that I would definitely be pulling timing on the street if I had a Vortech with no intercooler on it. But if I had one in my truck, I would definitely have an intercooler on it. GT35 is tiny on an LS, one side hot, low buck boost, can't overboost. Nitromethane on a supercharged 3.8. Okay. 63 bug with a later model dual port. It's a different kind of fun. Front wheels off the ground, every gear, but was pushing 90 to 95 miles an hour. To pull the front wheels in a Volkswagen, it must have been something way more than the stock dual port. Was it a big stroker one or something? Mercedes had 6.2s and 6.5s. Twin turbo V12, yep. Fuel prices and tax limit, the owner pool. 90% of cars are 2 liters or under. Yeah, I remember way back when Ferrari did their Turbo 208 because they were trying to get around that displacement tax, and so they did a 2-liter version of their 308 quattro valve motor, and they did a 2-liter version of it and then added a turbo to it. I always thought that was cool because it had, I think, very, very similar power and acceleration numbers as the 308 did. The M90 on the 3800 is not what I'd call short snout. It's not what I'd call either one either. That's why I was wondering what his definition was. 6-liter John LQ9. Oh, with the Vortech, yeah, that'd be a good combination. But just make sure that you're getting cold air to it. And I'd try to get some sort of intercooler, even not a Vortech one. I would get one like an aftermarket one. The Intech has a galaxy pattern on it. During its entire production run, the engine displacement of 6.8 liters was the largest V8 engine ever built by Mercedes by any European manufacturer since the Second World War. I thought that the Mercedes was a 6.9 in their sedan. I thought they had a 6.3 and a 6.9. Yeah, they did have a 6.9. That's right. Maybe you meant 6.9. If you had a weekend, would you bother with all-wheel drive conversion or stay on a 275 rear-wheel drive? Well, Robert, what are you doing with it? Are you trying to drag race the thing? Or are you trying to rock crawl it? What is it you're trying to get done here? 63 is very light in the front end. Oh, the Volkswagen is? Also, I know about trial port. I don't know what that is. The European, I think the small turbo V8s we get here are very unreliable and compared to a Hellcat or LT4. I had a 62 Myers Manx 74 Beetle motor. Topped out at 60. I honestly don't think I would be wanting to go 95 miles an hour in a Volkswagen. They did V12s. Yeah, there were, the Jaguar V12s weren't very big though, right? But they were 5 or 5.5 liters or something. The 6.9 was a 6. The 6.9 liter Mercedes was a V8. I'm working on an intercooler for Vortech. I didn't know what it would be. It would be getting as how as it was, how hot as it was. It was just standard truck spacing Vortech intake. However, they run it straight about the headers. Kind of hard to get cold air to a centrifugal unless you have room to run piping or a front facing for a Corvette or something. Yeah, the reverse rotations made that a little bit easier, but it's the same situation that we had with the Mustang. You just have to route it over to the fender well. Oh, Robert, you're drag racing it? Well, are the surfaces prepped that you're running on? Do you have a good enough 60-foot time? If not, and you want to run all-wheel drive, that can be beneficial. I don't know. I don't have a feel for what the trade-off is for weight on a prep surface. On a non-prep surface, all-wheel drive is going to be way better. It almost always is. Turbo and old Jaguar V12. Oh, dual port, okay. My exhaust fabricator and welder runs a Beetle. There was a guy at the, what the heck was the guy's name? He worked at Dugan's, and he used to race his VW, and his VW was fast. It was real fast. He used to do a lot of Mexico street racing with it. My stand rail front end is light enough I can pick it up by hand. It's not bringing the front tires off the ground unless I hit something hard. 5.3 for the Jag. That's what I thought it was, yeah. Then 80 in a VW on the salt flats. Did 70s on a sand rail. I remember driving on the freeway in my Super Beetle, but it seemed like it didn't have a lot left. Measured horsepower. Right now, the noise, I have some frogs in the background. A friend of mine bored a dual port, ran oil through an oil cooler, made it run faster somehow. I said I saw him drift all the way around the McDonald's. So it was 110 top speed. 110 in Volkswagen? It would have to be heavily modified. The Manx was so light that 2 people could pick it up. I swapped a set of 205 heads on the Alphabet Cam 302. Huge difference. Yeah, James, did you swap out the stock heads for AFR 205 heads? That would be a big change in power, big change in airflow. The stock heads are just not good, especially in a situation where you've already put the heads. I mean, already put the cam and intake manifold on it, and it's just begging for cylinder heads. Been hearing the noise. I don't really hear any of the drives, but we do hear the frogs are really loud. Yeah, you can still hear them, and they're there day and night. Seems to be a little bit more at night, but they're definitely there right now. Last night we had a very, very big raccoon. He was big enough to turn the light sensor on in the backyard. This was about 4 o'clock in the morning or something, because the light came on, and I'm like, "What is that? What turned the light on?" So I jumped up. I'm like, "Uh-oh, I'm gonna have to regulate." And went outside, and there's the raccoon could care less. It was gigantic. It was probably it was a lot fatter, but it seemed like it was about as big as Bruno is. And he's just walking around through the grass, and he didn't care that the light was on at all. He's like, okay, good, now I can see like more food, I can go find some stuff. But then when the dogs jumped up on the glass window, then that scared him away. He was, but I actually wasn't going to let the dogs out. I didn't know how they would fare against something that was that big. The dogs are still small. They're not puppies, but they're 2-year-olds. Whatever you just did stopped it. You probably can't hear it while I'm talking because I talk over the noise for the dogs. I think Super Beetle with top end was 90 to 95. Carb limited him to 4,500 RPM. Let's see if we can find something here. 1973 VW Super top speed. Let's see, what should I be expecting from the top speed? I'm getting 60, 65 miles an hour at 3,000 RPM. This guy's saying that he's cruised at 80 miles an hour. Cruised at 70. I had it up to almost 90, and it still had a bit left to go. All right. I got my stock 74 Super Beetle to 90 once, 95 on a downhill, 0 to 60 in 15 seconds. Wow. I've got over 90 going downhill. That's fast. It's some kind of mechanical noise. Need to settle an argument. Isn't a turbocharger technically a supercharger? Turbine-driven supercharger. If so, calling a centrifugal a belt-driven turbo sounds weird. I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question. It seems like you're arguing about esoteric things, but there have been people who call turbochargers a form of supercharging. So I don't know if you're looking for a scientific explanation. A centrifugal supercharger, the reason that they're calling that a mechanically driven turbo is because it has what is essentially a turbo impeller that they are driving mechanically. So there's something to be said for that. Both of them supercharge the engine, and by that I just mean that as a generic term, that they're force feeding the motor more air than it could ingest of its own accord. But all the forms of supercharging do that, turbos and superchargers. My Beetle was a 74, bought it with a spun rod bearing. Stock to 205 heads. That was my first personal experience with aftermarket heads ever. Yeah, that should work good. To me, belt-driven turbo sounds stupid since there's no turbine. It's a supercharger with no turbine, so supercharger. I kind of use it as the turbo is exhaust driven, so that's its separate thing. And then the other things are mechanically driven. And whether now we have, I would argue also that driving them with an electric motor is still a mechanical coupling. And so that's not, I don't think that a turbo driven by an electric motor is a turbo unless it is also driven by the exhaust. But that's just me. I'm not saying that that's an absolute. I don't care what other people say. They can be as wrong as they want. Good times, good times. You know, that's all good. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to be absolutely right. We don't have to be, all the things that we like don't have to be absolute. People wage wars over stupid stuff like that. It's nonsense. We should just be all outside listening to the frogs. Here, let me spin through this thing again. Supercharger. That is a supercharger. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to that motor a little bit here. So that's the air to water intercooler that we have. I run that on a lot of stuff, but I've also run the one that we run from CX Racing. You can get it on, a lot of the companies sell it. I just happen to do a bunch of stuff with the guys from CX Racing because Kevin's a good guy. And they were close to Westech. So if we had emergency things that we had to get, we could actually just go up and get them rather than ship them. So it all worked out good. But there are lots of intercooler cores that I use. All of the Big Bang stuff use the twin core. But what we did essentially for 1,000 horsepower, let's say, and under stuff, we just use a single version of that, of the big 3.5 in, 3.5 out, single core. That core is actually, I think, bigger than this one. I'd have to actually measure the surface area and then calculate in the thickness, but we know that that core will go way more than 1,000 horsepower because we've done that. But this worked good. And having had a Vortech supercharger on my Mustang for, I don't know, I think it was 7 or 8 years, probably something like that. It might even be more than that. And having run it, you know, with no intercooler on it for its almost all of its life, except for a short, brief period where we ran an intercooler on it that we tried at the beginning. I would do it, were I doing it again, I would definitely have an intercooler on it. Has anyone ever made an electric turbo or supercharger that actually worked? Yeah, that is, I mean, the Formula One guys have done that. But there are some aftermarket or YouTube stuff where guys have done it, where they have driven, I think it was a Vortech, could have been a ProCharger, but some sort of centrifugal supercharger. They spin that up with an electric motor, and so that they have the booster, like a, you know, all the boost basically all the time, and then run that. But, you know, it begs the question, how much juice do you need to run a motor that's capable, electric motor that's capable of doing that? You know, at what voltage, and how are you stepping that up, and what's all the other things that make that work? Do people want to do that? I don't know that they would yet. For a stock bottom end 6-liter turbo build, is a 706 the preferred stock cathedral board head? No, I would say that it's not. First of all, you can make how much, I don't know how much power you're trying to make. So you'd always have to start off with that. What is your desired power level, and what are you doing with it? Then the question is, can you make that power with a turbo on an LS with any of the stock heads? The answer would be yes. If you have a 6-liter, the chances are 99% that it came, especially if it's an iron one, it came with 317 heads. And you can make the, if you want to make 1,000 horsepower or even more than that, you could do that with a stock 317 heads. I wouldn't usually put 706 heads on a turbo 6-liter. I would keep the 317s on there. Or if I was going to put something else on there, I would try to put 799s or 243s on there. Are they frogs or toads? I think that they're frogs. Found out the other day that my Yukon is faster than a new F250. Very cool. Some modern AMG cars have electric superchargers, cold side of a turbo driven by an electric motor. Richard, are you familiar with Alex LTDX YouTube? I think somebody sent me a link or a video of that. Six Racing was in Huntington Beach back in the day. I don't remember them being in Huntington Beach. There's channel where this guy's working on it. Honda's new V3 uses an electric supercharger. I know they're putting it in 2 different bikes. Not sure what else. Interesting motor design. That is cool. If you can get the electric portion of that working and spin the supercharger up, that's good. If you have supporting mods capable of 3,000 horsepower, would a stock L92, for example, be able to withstand that? No. You don't. The block is not. Almost nothing that is stock on that motor is capable of that power level. In fact, at half that power level, almost everybody that's wanting it to run more than a handful of runs out on the track is doing an aftermarket block. And then all the other things are aftermarket too. How do you determine what size pulley? I have a 290 on a power dyne. I have seems they've been higher RPM range make boost. I have this stock that was on it, a 325. That put boost down lower. The smaller the pulley, the more boost you're going to make. The more boost you're going to make at every RPM. So a bigger pulley doesn't do that. I've been for a swim in Huntington Beach in '84. I lived down in Newport, actually and my shop was in Huntington Beach. I lived on the line, the city, I guess, what is it, the city limits line between Newport and Huntington. I heard that the development I4 with LS head has been killed. Do you know if it's true? If you're talking about the blueprint engine thing, that was not a real thing. He has a series of videos on electric supercharger. Yeah, that's the guy that I was talking about that has done it. I thought that he had done it. It was fun. I lived down there when I was going to school. We lived right on seashore, so like right on the beach. It was nice. I'm here late behind. Would a SI be better for some than a TI? Well, if you're not wanting what a TI can do, the SI might be better. I would honestly, I don't know that I've ever looked at those to try to find out which one had the most, let's say, responsive boost curve at a lower power output, or at the same power output, because or at the same boost output, let's say. So you have to pick what variable you want to be comparing them all with, because if you pick the same boost at the top, then they should have definitely different curves getting there, because the TI is a bigger blower than an SI is. And so it might be that the SI would be better down low, but what you've done is you've probably spun the SI a little faster to make it do that, to get to the same boost level as the TI up at the top. So have you artificially changed it? Do you want to do the comparison where you're spinning them both at the same RPM? Is that the metric? What is the thing that you're using to, like, compare the two? AMG uses the electric supercharger on their C63 since it's a hybrid, so they have 48-volt electrical system, 2-liter turbo, and electric supercharged engine, and then several electric motors. Okay, yeah, all that's good stuff. So it has a turbo and an electric supercharger? So it's twin charged, and then also has the hybrid electric motors attached to the wheels. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool, yo. Just mount a Tesla motor to turbo. I think an electric supercharger would benefit from a mechanical drive on startup. Imagine the nightmare it's going to be when it's 15 years old. Yeah, I think that people thought this when we first went to fuel injection, but I think what you have, I don't know if the technology is advancing so much faster than the knowledge is, because I think that you're right. If you have one of those that has all of this, like what kind of guy is going to be able to service them? Like if there was a Tesla, let's say, in a wrecking yard that wasn't working, how many people are going to be able to make that work? BMW has an electric motor to spin up the turbo at low RPM, then exhaust takes over to virtually eliminate lag. That's a good idea. I think that's a good combination. Remember what a nightmare the 300ZX twin turbo maintenance was? Yeah, when you like drop a quarter or whatever in the engine bay and it never hits the ground, you're like, oh yeah, there's just too much stuff in here. Rich rebuilds, fixes electric cars. I'm not saying that there's not a guy to do that. I'm saying that there's lots of guys that can fix a motor or get a motor from the wrecking yard and swap it in their car. I don't know how many people there are going to be that are going to be doing that with electric motors, or how many guys even now are taking an LT motor, a direct injected LT motor, and then swapping it into their Chevelle or their C10 or any of those, because that's not even a giant level of technology above an LS. It's just a direct injection, so it's just a little bit more problematic in terms of the fuel system and variable cam. But imagine when, like, who is going to want to swap one of these electric supercharged, turbocharged hybrid combinations into something else? I just think I think that's going to be problematic for the average hot rodder guy. You need the mind of Stephen Hawking's and the attitude of an MMA fighter. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for learning it. I'm just saying that even if there are guys like me or like you guys that would try to take that on, there's going to be way more people that won't take it on. There are guys now that we can coax into doing an LS swap and something. You go on YouTube, this shows you how to do it. But I don't know that that's going to continue with more sophisticated technology. Mercedes stuff can be hell when the wire cuttings break off and causes fires or shorts. Imagine electric vehicles will be worse. The front end of a Tesla will get you a 250 kilowatt front clip. Any plans for L8Ts? I haven't ever run one. I want 25 horsepower each electric front wheels to pit on a 2-wheel drive car. Just need a 300,000 mile capable rotary engine. What is the, how long do those normally last? I don't remember what the longevity is. I want to invent a technology that lets me fire the government officials that tax big engines so that I can have big V8s. Yeah, that would be good. There would be something to be said for that. So just imagine if we look at this picture, you just put a turbo back behind that muffler. It'd be all set then. Oh, so we can keep this going. Let's keep the party going. Wow. Pulleys and dampers, and I had to pin this thing, otherwise we would get slippage. ATI being all excellent and stuff. We ran a couple of different Vortech superchargers on this thing. Oh, here's a good photo. Okay, so you can see on the belt that we had, I put a second idler on there to stop the chordal action of the belt, the sine wave. But the problem is that when you go to tension the other tensioner, the normal Vortech temperature tensioner, that it pushes the belts together and they almost touch. We need a new Gen 427 camera engine. Those are gigantic on the top. Everything's getting more complex. Just try swapping a second-hand control module out of any ECU, window controller, without the proper kit and online access. Yeah, I can't imagine that. I need to put new, I'm sure it's probably the window regulators on my truck because they roll up really, really slow. Richard, do you prefer turbos or superchargers or a belt-driven system? Do you you have to ask me for what the application's for. If the supercharger belt rubs is drift spec. My truck also needs a new door panel, passenger side door panel. You know, like you do. 2002. That's cheap. That's like 100. They're like $100 or something. Oh, that one's $349. That's like big money. And actually, on mine, I think the only thing that's bad is the handle. eBay. Graphite 12D. Mine's not 2500 HD. Mine is a 1500. Near. Where'd I go? Where'd everybody go? There we go. What's your opinion on torque storms? I've used them on a lot of different motors. They work good. Does your truck have a cam? My truck is all stock. My 355,000 mile thing is all stock. Supercharger is expensive. What does a 90 or 100 millimeter turbo cost versus the 6 or 871? I think that those blowers are probably a few $1,000s, right? Grant should easily buy 1,000 plus horsepower eBay turbo. Oh yeah, they're probably less than that. Well, our turbo that will do probably 1,200 or more will be less than that. It will be less. One more minute. Okay, so we can keep going here. Let's see this.
I'm going to work.
You taking off? Yeah. Okay, no. Thanks for coming by, man. We'll see you later. You can see in this photo, this thing also had very cool. I'm sure they sent me these because there's no way that I would have bought them. It's very cool. The ceramic spark plugs, ceramic spark plug boots. You know, because they're like full race. I'd like a turbo to feed my roots blower. Yep. Probably spent more on my hot side plumbing than on my VS Racing turbo. Are centrifugals good for trucks or not? Yeah, they are. That's what we were talking about at the very beginning. Is the way to do it is like for a truck application, since you're only running to 5,500 RPM, you just turn the supercharger up a lot to get it to make 15 or 20 pounds on the top where you don't care about it, but it's making good power. Like at 5,500, this thing was making 750 or something at 5,500. If you're lucky, maybe a junkyard with a big truck or old farm equipment might have a blower, might require some rebuild or slight mods. I've never seen anything like that in any wrecking yard that I've ever been to. Freiberger knows his spark plugs. Well, why is Freiberger's? I don't remember seeing David do any spark plug testing. Hood flex joints are a lot. Oh, good. I was gonna say. Yeah, you can buy the junk ones for next to nothing, but that's how long they last. We don't ever run flex stuff on the dyno. You work for Jacobs? I didn't think Jacobs did spark plugs. Did they do spark plugs too? I knew that they did wires and the ignition amplifiers and stuff, but I didn't know if they sold actual spark plugs. Just had a customer bring in a T-Rex. He just bought an aftermarket supercharger on it. He didn't know it was locked up. I like watching Steve Morris read plugs. Side gap plugs or split fires. Split fires has been it's been a long time since I've seen any of those. I remember that they sponsored the I think they sponsored the Silver State race one year. But on that note, it is time to go. I will see you guys all later.